Finance Minister Bill Morneau on a very big day. Minister Morneau, always good to see you. Hope you and the family are well, and thanks for making time. Obviously, the headline today, deficit much bigger than anybody thought, $343 billion. The parliamentary budget officer, Yves Giroux, was just on our program, and he used the words, this is scary and disappointing. Scary because the numbers are big. He said disappointing that there's no game plan for recovery. What would your response to the PBO be on that?
Look, it's never going to be my situation, Evan, where I'm going to criticize the parliamentary budget officer. But let me just tell you where we are coming from in this. We took the decision in this pandemic, the decision to support Canadians. We looked at the challenge, similar challenge that countries around the world were facing, and we said to ourselves that the only way to get through this is to support Canadians, to support jobs, to get us through a particularly difficult time. Someone was going to take on the debt to get us through this, and we realized that the federal government was in the best position fiscally to do that. Households weren't, corporate sector wasn't. So this was a significant investment in Canadians, in Canada's future. We saw no other way to get through it other than that. And with respect to a plan for the future, well, I'll tell you what our plan is right now. Our plan is to work with Canadians to get through a safe restart. That is the plan. We need to think about where we are in this pandemic. It is not over. We need to recognize that we've done a good job till now in getting the case count down, but we need to continue that work. Our economic outcomes will be directly related to our success in doing that. And at that time, we will be able to think about how we continue to find a way to grow our economy, to create jobs, to create long-term opportunities. That's the plan. We think it's the appropriate plan in the face of an absolutely unprecedented and unbelievable challenge that we're all facing together.
There's no question there was an emergency crisis, and no one's doubting that. There was a need to support businesses and families. I appreciate that. But let's get back to this number. What's the red line for you in terms of danger zone? You've got now more than 10 times the deficit we had 5 months ago. You've got $343 billion. You've got a debt of over $1 trillion for the first time in history. You've still got unemployment at the highest in the G7, 13.7%. And the debt to GDP ratio that you always talk about is closing in on 50%. What is the line that makes you worried that we just can't ever crawl out of this, sir?
Well, let's break down a few things you just said, Evan. The starting point is we need to have an economy when we get out of this. We need to have jobs. We need to be able to work together to create those great opportunities. So we are absolutely focused on supporting our way to get through this. Now, our situation, we came into this with a very strong fiscal position. As you just said, the lowest debt to GDP among G7 countries, and way, way lower. We happen to be in a position, a fortunate position, where the cost of debt today is lower than it's literally ever been. So the cost of actually paying for that debt is now around 1% of GDP, which is 6 times lower than it was back in the 1990s. So we need to think about how we preserve our economy. We need to focus on how we get back to growth. And that is going to be the way that we maintain that fiscal, approach that has worked so well for Canada. We are still, after all of this, because remember, all countries are facing the same sort of challenge. We are still, after all of this, in the best position among G7 countries. We do need to focus on getting those jobs. We need to focus on getting that growth. That's what we're going to do. And together, we're going to come out of this stronger if we keep that correct focus. Now, I will say that we need to remember that every investment we need at this time needs to be focused on COVID-19, and it has to be time limited. And that'll allow us to get out of this to think about how we grow in the future.
What about, okay, you're extending the wage subsidy beyond October now, $82 billion. That actually hasn't had nearly the uptake that you guys thought it would. Will you extend other programs? For example, the most popular program was the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit. Are you open to extending that program, and for how long?
Well, maybe I can just give you a sense of how I see this moving forward. So we've said that we're extending the emergency response benefit till the end of the summer. So we see that program declining as we move back into the employment insurance system. So we're working on how we can decline the CERB, increase utilization of the regular employment insurance system infrastructure. At the same time, what we've provisioned for in this fiscal snapshot is we've said we want a provision for the wage subsidy growing in importance. So taking away disincentives so that more firms can use it, and use it so they have the right amount of support so they can rehire and get people back to work. We think those three programs working together are important. And let me just challenge you. You said that the wage subsidy wasn't having the desired impact. Right now, we have 1 out of 4
I said, sorry, to be fair, I said
in a private sector
the
company.
pickup. Yeah, I just said Carla Qualtrough, your own minister and your colleague, has said that the take-up was much lower than you expected.
The challenge with some of these programs is the take-up happens over time as firms realize that it's appropriate for them, as they see that there's an extension, and that's exactly what we've seen. So we have 3 million Canadian workers now, and you remember that only firms that in the original incarnation had 30% or more revenue decline were eligible. So it's doing exactly what we hoped, and what we've provisioned for is that we can make sure that that program takes a bigger load in getting us back to work. Now, we have to get back to work safely, and that's why we're having the discussions with the provinces around a safe restart of the economy, which I'm encouraged are going well, but we need to keep the pressure on so that we get that agreement done.
Yeah, and there's a lot of revenues down. One of the things that you talk about in this document on page 75 is the scenarios. One of them is a virus resurgence scenario. If there's a second wave, if the U.S., which is on fire with this virus, can't contain it, again, and things, we get a resurgence, are you open, just on a yes or no, are you open to extending the CERB past October, the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit?
Look, everything about this pandemic is unprecedented, and I don't have a crystal ball, and neither do you. What we need to do is work together to deal with this health crisis, because our economic advantage will really come out of that success. So we're going to keep doing that. We're going to keep making sure that we have supports that are appropriate for the stage and the reopening that we're at, because we think that's the way that we have an economy that works coming out of it, which is what all of us want. All of us want the jobs and the opportunities afterwards. So we are going to work to make sure that that outcome isn't the outcome. But of course, all of us need to work together. We need to have Canadians thinking about how we protect each other, how we manage through this crisis so that we come out of it with the opportunities that we want for our generation and for coming generations. It's been a huge shock to our system. We need to try and get past that, and the only way we'll do it is working together.
Are you open to morphing the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which 8 million people took up? Are you open to morphing that into a guaranteed basic income? Are you open to redefining the EI system to kind of merge those two to maybe be able to help more people in a little more efficient manner than the EI was before? So are we going to see some program changes in the next couple months?
Well, two things to respond to that. First of all, the pandemic has unearthed cracks in our system. So we need to acknowledge that. It's, none of us feel good about what's happened in long-term care homes. We know that there's many people who don't have access to employment insurance, and that doesn't work if all of a sudden a huge number of Canadians are out of work. So these problems exist. We need to face up to them. The kind of country that we all want to live in is one where we treat our elderly with respect and dignity. It's one where we recognize that there's sometimes challenges that we can't predict. So we're going to need to face up to that. But we're not thinking about whole-scale systemic change in a time of crisis. We're thinking about how we adjust and adapt, how we move forward. These programs we put in place are time-limited. And we'll need to face up to those longer-term challenges as we come out of it, but that is not what I'm focused on right now. I'm focused, the team is focused on thinking about how we transition into a safe restart and then get ourselves to a recovery as we get through that.
I'm reading the document, and I'm not a big surprise, Minister Morneau, but man, revenues have been absolutely kicked around. Personal income tax, corporate income tax, GST, all the revenues are way down. You got to get revenues to pay for these programs. Are you open? I know not now, but are you open in the future to some kind of tax, whether it's raising, HST tax, some consumer tax? Are raising taxes in some capacity on the table to get some revenue back into the government?
Well, you've asked me this before, Evan, and so, my view hasn't changed. What have we had happen here? We've had a pandemic which has crushed demand. We've actually asked people to stay home, so they haven't been spending. People's livelihoods have been interrupted. So the last thing we want to do is to raise taxes into that. That would actually take money out of people's pockets, and we actually want people to put money back into the economy. So the answer is a clear no. What we need to think about is how we grow. We need to think about creating the opportunities now that we're facing this challenge, because there will not be every job that we had before the pandemic coming back. We need to think about those jobs. That's going to be our area of focus. We need that economy to grow back to where we were at least, and then hopefully above and beyond that. And that is job one, job two, and job three as we come out of this.
But that's been the criticism today, is that where's the plan to grow? We were getting this quote unquote snapshot, but we didn't have the plan for growth. So I got to ask you, cities and provinces.
Let me just stop you there.
Okay, go.
Let me stop you there, Evan. I mean, the plan has to be appropriate to the time that we're in. So right now, the time that we're in is we've done a pretty good job at flattening this curve. We know we need to have a restart of the economy. The plan is to think about, what does a safe restart look like? So it's thinking about, we need to have childcare so people can get back to work. We need to have sick leave so people can take off work if they're sick. We need to have municipalities with the ability to have transit systems get people back and forth to work. Once we're back at work, we need to have testing and tracing capability. We need to have PPE. We need to protect our most vulnerable, because we don't want to have outbreaks that present them with big challenges. And of course, we need our healthcare system to be up to the task. So I would identify those 7 things as critical. We're negotiating with the provinces on those right now, and we're going to stay very focused on that. As we get through that, then that will be what will allow us to get to the next stage. But all of this is unprecedented. So for me to tell you this is what we're going to be looking like in 9 months would be a hypothesis that I don't have enough information to deliver right now. We're going to focus on the plan that we're doing right now. We're going to think about how we manage that debt for the long term, because we can put in place mechanisms to do that. And then when we get to investing for recovery, that's what we'll be doing at that stage.
Okay, last question on that, and I'll just return to this massive figure, $343 billion. We haven't seen numbers like this since the Second World War. So let's go back to another unprecedented time when Pierre Trudeau was in power during the War Measures Act, and he was asked how far would he go, and he said, just watch me. I'm going to ask you as the finance minister. You spent $343 billion. You've got a debt of over $1 trillion. The provinces are saying we need way more than $14 billion that you're spending. Let me ask you, how far are you willing to go in spending? How high could this deficit go, or do you have a ceiling in mind?
Well, I take that and I say, so what is the first order of business for a finance minister, or for that matter, for our government? We need to have an economy that creates the opportunities that people need to live their lives. So we need to focus on how we're going to do that, and we need to invest appropriately. We obviously need to be fiscally responsible along the way, so it has to be about this pandemic. In discussions with the provinces, we are going to continue to work constructively, but we need to be really clear. 9 out of 10 of every dollar that's been spent on the support for people during the course of this challenges has been spent by the federal government. We've stepped up because we know that we have the capacity to do that. We need to work together with the provinces. There are things that they're going to need too. They've been good partners, but we need to keep that pressure, that important pressure on, because we actually need to work together to get to a safe restart. That's what's going to take us to the next stage. And we are all in this together, Evan. We're all in this together. We need to get to a healthy economic restart, which will be about our health.
Last question to you. Look at the ethics commissioners investigating.
You said it was the last question already.
Well, this is the second last. This is the real last question, Minister.
Okay.
Just quickly on the $900 million that goes to the weed, that went originally to the weed charity. Now you're back on it's off from them. The Prime Minister said that Cabinet made that decision. Did you see that in front of you, where you're going to spend one sole source to the weed charity, where they were going to pay teachers and camps money? Did you give that the green light as well? And do you regret sole sourcing that contract originally to the weed charity?
Well, let's step back. I mean, what we're focused on was, we know that the people who've been hardest hit in this pandemic have been particular groups. So if and you'll see it in the document that we produced, young people have been hit harder than anyone else. Women have been hit disproportionately hard. New immigrants have been hit hard. So we were very focused on how do we support young people. There's a number of things that we did. The ESDC department came up with this plan. We continue to recognize that we need to be thinking about how do we support people to get them through this challenge. Students are critically important for all of our future. We need to make sure that they have supports. That's the frame that I've used, that we've used, and will continue to use.
All right, but you didn't say if you regret doing that through the We Charity. You're supporting students. Was that the wrong call in the end?
You keep saying that it's the last question, Evan, and you don't seem to be able to get there. What I'll continue to say is that supporting students was and is important. On that particular program, the department came up with an approach. We've backed away from that approach, and we're going to continue to think about how we support students. We're going to continue to recognize that as we go through this pandemic, we need to make decisions. We need to deliver with scale and speed as hallmarks of our decision making. And to the extent we need to change things as we go along, we will change them, because there's no playbook on this. Right. We need to be adaptable to try and protect people and create an economy for the future that's actually going to work.
All right, I really appreciate your time, Minister. I always do. This isn't question period. It's often answer period, so I'm always poking around for more answers. I appreciate your time. Thanks, Minister.
Okay, thanks. Take care.